Ilara awoke to the familiar groan of heavy doors and the harsh sunlight piercing the thin windows of her small, cramped room. She stretched, her muscles protesting the previous day's labor. Her stomach rumbled, a stark reminder that breakfast was a distant prospect. Her stepmother, Zara, cared little for Ilara's well-being, as long as her own desires were met. Ilara rose, smoothing down her worn clothing and braiding her tangled hair. The air hung heavy with dampness and stale perspiration, intensifying the feeling of confinement. The walls seemed to press in, threatening to suffocate her, but today, Ilara was determined to find a way out. Her first chore was tending to the stables. She found solace in the company of the animals, the only beings who offered unconditional acceptance. They didn't judge or ignore her, their needs were simple, and Ilara found comfort in their quiet companionship. Yet, no matter how diligently she worked, Zara always found fault. It seemed as if Zara relished diminishing Ilara, making her feel insignificant. "Ilara!" Zara's sharp voice echoed from the stable entrance. "Do you call this clean? The floor is still filthy. You're utterly useless." Ilara remained silent, knowing that arguing was futile. Zara was perpetually discontent, always searching for a reason to reprimand her. Nothing Ilara did ever seemed to suffice. Zara marched toward Ilara, her heels clicking against the stone floor. She seized a fistful of Ilara's hair, yanking it sharply. Ilara winced, biting back any reaction. "You should be grateful I even allow you to stay here," Zara hissed close to Ilara's ear. "I could easily cast you out, but I'm generous enough to keep you." "You're fortunate." Ilara clenched her fists, fighting back tears. She had no other option but to remain. She was a burden, a source of resentment for reasons Ilara couldn't comprehend. After finishing in the stables, Ilara went to the kitchen to prepare Zara's meal. Zara demanded culinary perfection, yet never offered a word of praise. The meal was simple, a meager portion of vegetables and grains, but Ilara prepared it with care, striving to make it palatable. She yearned for something more, perhaps a piece of fruit or a savory dish, but she had learned to temper her expectations. Even the smallest comforts felt like a gift. As Ilara set the food on the table, Zara materialized, her eyes narrowed in disapproval. "This doesn't look right," she sneered. "You think you can outdo me, don't you? This is completely wrong. I'll fix it myself." Ilara retreated, her spirit sinking. Even a simple task like cooking couldn't escape Zara's criticism. It felt as though nothing she did had any value. Days continued in this monotonous pattern. Ilara toiled endlessly, while Zara remained idle. At night, Ilara curled up on the hard floor of her room, gazing at the ceiling. Her heart ached, not from physical exertion, but from the emptiness within her. She barely remembered the sensation of laughter or a smile. She had no companions, no joy, no hope. Her only solace was the faint dream of escape, of a life free from Zara's tyranny. Yet, whenever she dared to envision freedom, Zara's voice echoed in her mind, reminding her of her supposed worthlessness. Then, one evening, following another day of relentless labor, something unexpected occurred. Ilara was working in the garden when Zara approached, a chilling smile playing on her lips. Ilara looked up, bracing herself for whatever was to come. "I've made a decision," Zara announced, her tone sharp and final. "You're no longer of any use here. I'm selling you." Ilara's heart lurched. "Sold? What did that mean?" "You heard me," Zara continued, her gaze condescending. "You'll be sold to the highest bidder. You're nothing but a burden, and I have no time for someone like you." Ilara's mind raced. She longed to scream, to resist, but she felt powerless. She was trapped, devoid of options. The tears she had suppressed for years finally flowed, but she quickly wiped them away, refusing to display any vulnerability. Zara let out a cruel laugh. "Don't cry. It won't change anything. You'll be out of my sight soon enough, and I'll finally be rid of you." With that, Zara turned and departed, leaving Ilara alone in the garden. The sound of her retreating footsteps faded as Ilara stood frozen, too stunned to move. Her world had shattered. Her heart pounded with fear. She couldn't foresee her future, but one thing was certain: she was no longer a servant. She was a commodity, an object to be bartered. And no matter how much she abhorred it, she was powerless to prevent what was about to happen. Yet, deep within, a flicker of hope remained. Perhaps, just perhaps, someone would come to rescue her. She clung to that fragile hope. Anya roused from sleep as the familiar groan of the heavy stable doors echoed through the thin walls of her cramped attic room. The morning sun, harsh and unforgiving, streamed through the grimy window panes. She stretched, her weary muscles complaining after yesterday's arduous chores. A gnawing emptiness in her belly reminded her that breakfast was a luxury she wouldn't be afforded. Her stepmother, Xenia, cared little for Anya's needs, focused solely on her own comfort and desires. Anya rose, smoothing her threadbare dress and plaiting her unruly hair. The air was thick with a musty odor of dampness and lingering perspiration, reinforcing the suffocating sense of confinement. The sloping ceiling seemed to press down on her, but today, a spark of defiance flickered within Anya. She was resolved to find a way out, to break free from this suffocating existence. Her morning began with the familiar routine of tending to the stables. Anya found a measure of solace in the quiet companionship of the animals, the only creatures who offered her unconditional acceptance. They didn't judge her, didn't ignore her, their needs were simple, and in their silent presence, Anya found a momentary respite from Xenia's constant disapproval. But no matter how diligently she worked, how meticulously she cleaned, Xenia always found fault. It seemed as if Xenia derived a perverse satisfaction from belittling Anya, from making her feel small and insignificant. Anya! Xenia's shrill voice cut through the stillness of the stable. Is this what you call clean? The stalls are still filthy. You're hopelessly incompetent. Anya remained silent, knowing that arguing was pointless. Xenia was a bottomless well of discontent, perpetually seeking a reason to berate her. Nothing Anya did ever seemed to satisfy her insatiable need for criticism. Xenia strode towards Anya, her heels clicking sharply against the cobblestone floor. She grabbed a fistful of Anya's hair, twisting it painfully. Anya winced, suppressing a cry. You should be grateful I haven't thrown you out, Xenia hissed, her voice close to Anya's ear. I could easily cast you out on the streets, but I'm being charitable by keeping you here. You should be thankful. Anya clenched her jaw, fighting back tears of frustration and humiliation. She had nowhere else to go, no one to turn to. She was trapped, a burden, a source of Xenia's inexplicable resentment. After finishing her chores in the stables, Anya trudged to the kitchen to prepare Xenia's midday meal. Xenia expected culinary perfection, yet never offered a word of praise or appreciation. The meal was simple, a meager plate of boiled vegetables and coarse grains, but Anya prepared it with care, hoping to make it at least somewhat palatable. She longed for something more, a taste of fresh fruit, a morsel of something sweet, but she had learned to suppress such desires. Even the smallest indulgences felt like an unattainable luxury. As Anya placed the plate on the table, Xenia appeared, her lips curled into a sneer. This is unacceptable, she declared, her eyes narrowed in disdain. You think you're better than me, don't you? This is completely wrong. I'll do it myself. Anya retreated, her spirits plummeting. Even a simple task like preparing a meal couldn't escape Xenia's harsh judgment. It felt as if nothing she did had any value, as if she herself was worthless. Days bled into weeks, weeks into months, each one a monotonous echo of the last. Anya toiled ceaselessly, while Xenia remained idle, indulging in her own selfish pursuits. At night, Anya curled up on the hard floor of her attic room, her gaze fixed on the cracks in the ceiling. Her heart ached, not from physical exertion, but from the hollowness that gnawed at her soul. She barely remembered the sound of her own laughter, the feeling of a genuine smile. She was utterly alone, devoid of companionship, joy, or hope. Her only solace was the faint, flickering dream of escape, of a life free from Xenia's oppressive reign. Yet, whenever she dared to envision such a future, Xenia's venomous words echoed in her mind, a constant reminder of her supposed worthlessness. Then, one dreary evening, after another grueling day of labor, the unthinkable happened. Anya was weeding the garden when Xenia approached, a chilling smile playing on her lips. Anya looked up, bracing herself for the inevitable criticism. "I've reached a decision," Xenia announced, her tone sharp and final. "You're no longer of use to me. I'm selling you." Anya's breath hitched. "Sold? What could that possibly mean?" "You heard me correctly," Xenia continued, her gaze filled with contempt. "You'll be sold to the highest bidder. You're a burden, a drain on my resources, and I have no further use for you." Anya's mind reeled. She wanted to scream, to protest, to fight back, but a wave of helplessness washed over her. She was trapped, utterly powerless. The tears she had suppressed for so long finally spilled over, but she quickly wiped them away, refusing to show any vulnerability. Xenia let out a cruel, mocking laugh. "Don't bother crying. It won't change a thing. You'll be out of my sight soon enough, and I'll finally be rid of you." With that, Xenia turned and walked away, leaving Anya alone in the deepening twilight. The sound of her receding footsteps faded into the stillness as Anya stood frozen, too numb to move. Her world had crumbled around her. Fear pulsed through her veins. She couldn't imagine what the future held, but one thing was certain: she was no longer a servant. She was a commodity, an object to be bought and sold. And despite the revulsion that churned within her, she was powerless to stop it. Yet, buried deep within the despair, a flicker of hope stubbornly refused to be extinguished. Perhaps, just perhaps, someone, somewhere, would help her. She clung to that fragile hope, a lifeline in the encroaching darkness. Anya spent the next several days in a daze. The marketplace bustled with activity, filled with strange sights and sounds, but Anya barely registered them. She was acutely aware of the trader's rough hand on her arm, guiding her through the throngs of people. The trader, a gruff man named Gregor, spoke little, only occasionally muttering to himself about prices and potential buyers. Anya remained silent, her mind reeling from the sudden upheaval of her life. She couldn't comprehend how quickly her world had changed, how easily she had become a commodity to be bartered and sold. The sun beat down mercilessly, and the dust from the marketplace coated her skin, adding to the sense of grime and discomfort. She longed for the familiar, even oppressive, routine of the stables, for the silent companionship of the animals. They reached a small, dimly lit stall tucked away in a quieter corner of the marketplace. A man sat within, observing the passing crowd with an air of detached amusement. He was tall and imposing, with dark hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through Anya. Gregor pushed Anya forward, roughly. "Here's a prime specimen for you, Master Theron," he announced, his voice oily and ingratiating. "Young, healthy, no blemishes. She'll fetch a good price." Theron's gaze lingered on Anya, assessing her with a chilling intensity. He didn't speak, but Anya could feel the weight of his scrutiny, as if he were judging her worth, not as a person, but as an object. A wave of nausea washed over her. "How much?" Theron finally asked, his voice deep and resonant. Gregor named his price, a sum that made Anya's stomach churn. The casual way they discussed her value, as if she were a piece of livestock, filled her with a chilling sense of dehumanization. Theron didn't haggle. He simply nodded, produced a small pouch of coins, and handed it to Gregor. The transaction was swift and impersonal, a stark reminder that Anya's fate was now in the hands of this stranger. "Come along," Theron commanded, his voice brooking no argument. Anya followed, her heart pounding with apprehension. Theron led her through the labyrinthine marketplace to a small, sparsely furnished room in a nearby building. The room contained little more than a bed, a chair, and a small table. It was stark and impersonal, yet a strange sense of relief washed over Anya. At least, for the moment, she was away from the prying eyes of the marketplace. "You'll stay here," Theron instructed, his tone curt. "You'll work for me. I expect obedience. Understand?" Anya nodded silently, too afraid to speak. She had no idea what kind of work he expected of her, but she was determined to comply. Survival was her only priority. The days that followed blurred into a monotonous routine of cleaning, cooking, and running errands for Theron. He remained a distant, enigmatic figure, rarely speaking to her beyond issuing instructions. Anya learned to anticipate his needs, to move silently and efficiently, to avoid attracting his attention. She ate little, slept poorly, and the constant fear gnawed at her. She missed the fresh air, the open sky, the comforting presence of the animals. She yearned for a friendly face, a kind word, a moment of respite from the oppressive loneliness. Then, one afternoon, as Anya was cleaning Theron's study, she heard a gentle knock at the door. A young man entered, his eyes warm and friendly. He was dressed simply, but his demeanor radiated a sense of quiet confidence. "Hello," he said, his voice soft and reassuring. "I'm Kalen. Are you all right?" Anya stared at him, speechless. No one had asked her that simple question in what felt like an eternity. Tears welled in her eyes, but she quickly blinked them away, unwilling to show any vulnerability. Kalen's smile didn't falter. "I'm here to help," he continued, his voice gentle. "I'm with a group that helps people like you. We're here to get you out of here." Anya's heart lurched. Could it be true? Could she actually escape this life? Anya found herself in a daze for the next few days. The bustling marketplace, a cacophony of unfamiliar sights and sounds, barely registered in her awareness. She was acutely conscious, however, of the rough hand of the trader, Gregor, on her arm, steering her through the throngs of people. Gregor, a gruff, taciturn man with a prominent scar across his cheek, spoke little, only occasionally muttering to himself about potential buyers and haggling prices. Anya remained silent, her mind still reeling from the abrupt and violent upheaval of her life. She couldn't grasp how quickly her world had been turned upside down, how easily she had been reduced to a commodity to be bartered and sold. The relentless sun beat down, and the fine dust of the marketplace settled on her skin, adding to the pervasive sense of grime and discomfort. She ached for the familiar, even if oppressive, routines of the stables, for the quiet solace of the animals. They eventually arrived at a dimly lit stall tucked away in a quieter corner of the marketplace. A man sat within, observing the passing crowds with an air of detached amusement. He was tall and imposing, with dark hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to penetrate Anya's very being. Gregor shoved Anya forward roughly. "Here's a fine piece for you, Master Theron," he announced, his voice oily and ingratiating. "Young, strong, no obvious flaws. She'll bring a good price." Theron's gaze lingered on Anya, assessing her with a chilling intensity. He remained silent, but Anya felt the weight of his scrutiny, as if he were calculating her worth, not as a human being, but as an object to be acquired. A wave of nausea washed over her. "What's your price?" Theron finally inquired, his voice deep and resonant. Gregor named his price, a sum that made Anya's stomach clench. The casual manner in which they discussed her value, as if she were a mere animal, filled her with a chilling sense of dehumanization. Theron didn't bother to haggle. He simply nodded, produced a small pouch of coins, and handed it to Gregor. The transaction was swift and impersonal, a stark reminder that Anya's fate now rested in the hands of this enigmatic stranger. "Come along," Theron commanded, his voice brooking no argument. Anya followed, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and apprehension. Theron led her through the crowded maze of the marketplace to a small, sparsely furnished room in a nearby building. The room contained little more than a bed, a chair, and a small table. It was stark and impersonal, yet Anya felt a strange sense of relief wash over her. At least, for the moment, she was shielded from the prying eyes of the marketplace. "You'll stay here," Theron instructed, his tone curt and businesslike. "You'll work for me. Obedience is expected. Do you understand?" Anya nodded silently, too intimidated to speak. She had no idea what kind of work he expected of her, but she was resolved to comply. Survival was her paramount concern. The following days merged into a monotonous routine of cleaning, cooking, and running errands for Theron. He remained a distant, inscrutable figure, rarely speaking to her beyond issuing concise instructions. Anya learned to anticipate his needs, to move with quiet efficiency, to avoid attracting his attention. She ate little, slept poorly, and the constant undercurrent of fear continued to gnaw at her. She missed the fresh air, the expanse of the sky, the comforting presence of the animals. She longed for a friendly face, a kind word, a moment of respite from the crushing loneliness. Then, one afternoon, as Anya was tidying Theron's study, she heard a soft knock at the door. A young man entered, his eyes warm and friendly. He was dressed simply, but his demeanor exuded a quiet confidence. "Hello," he said, his voice soft and reassuring. "I'm Kalen. Are you all right?" Anya stared at him, speechless. No one had addressed her with such simple concern in what felt like an eternity. Tears pricked at her eyes, but she quickly blinked them away, unwilling to display any vulnerability. Kalen's smile didn't waver. "I'm here to help," he continued, his voice gentle. "I represent a group that assists people in situations similar to yours. We're here to get you out of here." Anya's heart leaped. Could it possibly be true? Could she truly escape this life? The relief that flooded Anya when Kalen revealed his intentions was immense, yet tinged with disbelief. Could she truly escape Theron's grasp? Kalen explained the plan. They would smuggle her out during the next market day, amidst the chaos and confusion. He gave her a small vial filled with a clear liquid. "Drink this when I give the signal," he instructed. "It will make you appear ill. Theron will dismiss you, and that's when we'll make our move." Anya clutched the vial, her heart pounding with a mixture of hope and trepidation. The plan was audacious, risky, but it was her only chance. The following days were filled with a suffocating tension. Anya performed her duties mechanically, her mind racing, rehearsing the escape plan over and over. She barely slept, her stomach churning with a mixture of nerves and anticipation. The market day arrived, a swirling mass of humanity, a cacophony of sounds and smells. Anya saw Kalen in the crowd, a subtle nod confirming that everything was in place. He gave her the signal, a slight raise of his hand. Anya uncorked the vial and swallowed the liquid, a bitter taste lingering in her mouth. Within minutes, a wave of nausea washed over her. She stumbled, clutching her stomach, feigning illness. Theron, as expected, dismissed her with a wave of his hand. "Go lie down," he commanded, his voice laced with irritation. "I don't need your sickness spreading." Anya stumbled out of the building, her legs unsteady. Kalen materialized beside her, guiding her through the crowded marketplace. They moved swiftly, silently, melting into the throngs of people. Anya's heart pounded in her chest, a drumbeat of fear and excitement. She glanced back, but Theron was nowhere to be seen. They reached the edge of the marketplace, a small, inconspicuous cart waiting in the shadows. Kalen helped Anya into the cart, covering her with a blanket. The cart lurched forward, moving away from the marketplace, away from Theron's control, away from the life she had been forced to endure. Anya closed her eyes, exhaustion and relief washing over her. They traveled for what felt like hours, the cart jostling along rough roads. Finally, the cart came to a stop. Kalen helped Anya out, his hand warm and reassuring. They were in a small, secluded clearing, surrounded by trees. Anya looked around, taking in the fresh air, the natural beauty, the absence of fear. A group of people emerged from the trees, their faces kind and welcoming. Kalen introduced them, explaining that they were part of the network that helped people escape situations like Anya's. Anya spent the next few weeks in their care, slowly recovering from her ordeal. She slept soundly, ate well, and the constant fear that had gnawed at her began to dissipate. She learned about the network, their mission to help others, their commitment to justice and compassion. She began to feel a sense of belonging, a feeling she had never known before. One evening, as Anya sat by the fire with Kalen and the others, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. She looked at Kalen, his eyes reflecting the firelight, his presence a source of comfort and strength. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "For everything." Kalen smiled, his gaze warm and sincere. "You don't need to thank me," he replied. You're strong, Anya. You deserved a chance at a better life. Anya's life with the network was a journey of healing and self-discovery. She learned new skills, discovered hidden talents, and formed deep bonds of friendship with the others. The fear and uncertainty of her past gradually faded, replaced by a sense of purpose and belonging. Her love for Kaylin blossomed, a testament to the power of kindness and compassion to heal even the deepest wounds. They built a life together, a life founded on mutual respect, trust, and a shared commitment to helping others. Anya's past would always be a part of her, but it no longer defined her. She was no longer a victim, a commodity, a servant. She was Anya, a survivor, a friend, a lover, a beacon of hope for others who had endured similar hardships. And as she looked toward the future, she saw not darkness, but the promise of a brighter tomorrow.